Good evening and welcome to Montpelier Civic Forum 2025 as we prepare for Town Meeting Day. Now, I need to explain that all of these interviews that you're seeing are being filmed after Bill Fraser's contract was not extended. This is not going to factor into any of these discussions, but you should be aware that this did happen prior to this. Now, I would like to introduce to you Marc Gwinn, who is running in District 2, our district, for City Council in a contested race against incumbent Palin Cohn. And I would like to welcome Marc. What part of District 2 do you live in?
So I actually live right up the road from the college where we are now. I'm at the top of Nelson Street.
Living with whom?
I live there with my wife and my 3 kids. Imani, Silas, and Estelle are 13, 8, and 5.
In the district?
In the district, and they all go to the schools here in Montpelier.
Do they like them?
They love it, yes.
What's your thought on the schools?
I mean, I love that the schools are close by. They're walkable. It feels like a very tight community. Well, we moved here in the middle of a school year, and we were a little bit concerned because it's always hard for kids to move in the middle of the school year. I did it several times when I was a kid. But we had
several schools involved.
That's right.
One would be at MSMS and one would be at Union.
There was a little lucky happenstance there that in Bristol, across the mountain where we moved from, Imani was in elementary school in 5th grade and moved here and went to middle school in 5th grade. So it saved her that additional awkward transition from elementary to middle school that a lot of kids go through. So she got to do all that in one go. But we immediately found great community and sense of belonging in those schools and with the friends that the kids made very quickly.
Now, before you moved here, you must have visited Montpelier repeatedly.
Sure. My wife's dad grew up both here and in Barrie, so we already had a little bit of connection to it. But we were living in Bristol in Addison County, just across the mountain, and I came here for a work opportunity. So before we moved the family here, I had already been working here for several months.
Montpelier, when you first came here to visit your father-in-law and your family here, what was that like? What years are we talking about?
So we never came here to visit them. They'd already moved away by that time.
When you first laid eyes on Montpelier, what years were those?
So I gotta say, the first time I saw Montpelier, I was just driving through on my way to Maine, in fact. And
Onto.
What's that?
Onto.
Yes. So, but you could see that gold dome as you come off of the interstate, and I thought, well, I've got to take a tour through town and just drive through it. It was early in the morning, and I went in, and that morning sunlight was just sort of hitting the dome from the side at those hard angles, and it was really beautiful, really something special. And I wound up driving through town, and what really struck me was the bridges and the way the river flows through the city and the way the buildings are all sort of collected in a very somehow old-fashioned way that had a lot of charm and a lot of beauty to it.
Well, in a sense, downtown Montpelier is a downtown that urban redevelopment really didn't hit. Only that federal building that flooded out was really the only building that was not traditional downtown Montpelier. Well, that and City Center, but that's a completely different story. When you decided to take the work opportunity in Montpelier, this is a question I always ask. Is Montpelier a town or is Montpelier a city?
That's a good question. Having moved to Vermont from out of state, most of Vermont cities are towns when you think of it
Where out
in
of
that
state?
way. So we moved here from South Carolina.
A city, a suburb?
We were in a suburb of a city of Greenville, South Carolina. Greenville County has the same population as the state of Vermont in about the geographical size of Washington County, to give you some idea.
So Addison must have been a real eye-opener.
Oh, it was great. Addison was where we went to visit every year. We would come always during the summer, and they say you never fall in love with a place you've only been to in the spring and the summer. But we knew we were going to wind up in Vermont. Every year we'd come, and every year we'd go back, and we would just fantasize about one day the kids will be just the right age, we'll have just the right amount of money, the career will be just in the right spot, and then we'll go to Vermont. But it turns out that moment will never come, right? And in 2020, well, things just swung far enough in the opposite direction. We realized life is really too short. If that's what you want, you got to go. So that's why we came.
When you hit Montpelier from Addison County, did this seem like a city, or did it seem like a big town?
It seemed like a giant village, if that makes sense. It had the vibe of a small town, the closeness, but it also had the grandeur of a state capital and this large capital complex, which most cities don't have, right? That's something that's really special about Montpelier.
The job opportunity, who do you work for?
I work for Edward Jones. I'm a financial advisor.
How does that experience that you've had in that realm, what would you bring to council using that experience as a guide?
So that's a super question. First, I'm just going to describe a little bit what I do, and I think it's pretty obvious how that translates. So what we do is we help people plan for their financial future, whether it's retirement or buying a house or saving for college or whatever, all the things that we need money for. But money is the second piece. The first piece is listening, empathetic listening to understand what is really important to people. What do you really want out of life? And that's as much in the things that you do say as in the things you don't say. Only after we understand what it is you want is a conversation about money meaningful at all. And then the process requires discipline and follow through and execution, right? But it is not haphazard. Every short-term decision is made in service of those long-term goals. So you ask, what can I bring from work to City Hall? It is exactly that. Everything that all short-term decisions need to be made in service of the longer-term vision of what we as a community want. What do we want this place to look like in 10, 20, 50 years? What is the place I'm going to grow old in? What is the place my kids were going to move back to? I hope they move back. It's up to us to build that place. And the only way we do that is by being disciplined and holding ourselves accountable to that long-term vision in all of our short-term decisions.
This is a fascinating race in District 2 because both you and Palin sit on the Montpelier Alive board.
We do.
And I was wondering, sitting on the Montpelier Alive board, and I'll ask Palin the same question.
Sure.
What are the town's strengths that Montpelier Alive is seeking to market?
So that beauty that we talked about, that giant village vibe, the sense of tightness and closeness that we have, the rivers that we have running through our city, all of those are assets to us, of course. The nearby mountains, we are also, of course, a state capital. And so all of those things are draws. What the city has, though, is the people here. And not just the people who live here, but also the business owners who work here and really breathe life into our downtown, whether they live in Montpelier or not. The kind of dogged spirit that muscled through COVID, that came back after the flood, those are the things that are really going to get us through. Now, what are the things that Montpelier Alive specifically is working on? I'm really happy about the bridge illumination project. That is not just about the lights on the bridges, which are very beautiful, and I really appreciate them, but it's tied to a larger grant that is bringing, there's a whole branding and marketing effort that it goes along with that. It allows for the hiring of a person. And I'll just, a side note about Montpelier Alive. Katie Trouts and the whole team at Montpelier Alive have really turned the attention that we got from the flood into something much bigger. It is, it's almost completely funded through grants. And the attention that we got, we've hired a part-time person who just works on grants, Leslie, and she's done an amazing job. We have tripled or quadrupled our budget from previous years, and we're able to do these much bigger projects.
Yeah, the Rotary Club.
Yeah.
Two questions.
Sure.
You are the chair of the Rotary Club, president or chair?
The current president. Yeah.
What is the Rotary Club? Most people don't know.
Most people don't know. So that has been one of our challenges, and it's one of the things we've been working on this year. The Rotary Club has been, we had our 100th anniversary last year in Montpelier. And the projects that we do are centered around food insecurity and warmth insecurity. So those are things like the Backpack Food Program. Most people know that there is a program where kids who don't have food to eat on the weekends get food put into their backpacks to take home so that they can eat on days when they're not at school. We do that. The Kitzmiller Coat Drive, we didn't start it, but we took it over, and we've been running it for the past few years. And so we give away hundreds of coats every year.
For those of you who do not know, and I imagine that there are some, that's Warren Kitzmiller, the former owner of Onion River Sports when it was on Langdon, former State House representative, and basically a very visible figure who passed several years ago, and that was in honor of his wife, who also has a room on the second floor of the library in her honor.
That's right.
So continue, please.
So they ran it for a long time, and eventually, well, age will catch up with you, and so they partnered with Rotary, and then Rotary's taken over the execution of that each year since. We also focus on cross-cultural and educational opportunities. So, for example, right now there are 3 Montpelier High School students that are studying abroad for a year, one in France, one in India, and one in Chile. And we have students from abroad, one from Chile, one from Belgium, and one from Turkey, who are all here at Montpelier High School through the Rotary Youth Exchange Program.
How many people are in our Rotary?
So we have about 27 active members. That is down from, I think at the peak there were just over 100, but that was pre-COVID. And COVID really hurt the membership a lot. And also, quite honestly, club participation is in some ways an old-fashioned idea and has just not been repopularized again and again with younger generations. And I think that that's something that needs to change, and I think this is something we're working on.
Now, you also didn't mention that you sponsor a debate.
We do. So each year, the Rotary Club sponsors or holds in City Council chambers a debate between City Council candidates and mayoral candidates in every other year. This year, obviously, I have nothing to do with it whatsoever. I said,
except as a participant.
Except as a participant. So I said, if you guys could just handle it, that I don't want to have any hand in it because that would be unfair.
Let's get to a couple of issues that City Council has been working on. Housing, and that's obviously a very large one, and we're talking about Country Club Road. Now, Sabins Pasture has been discussed literally for decades. 25 years was the first, this will be the 25th anniversary of a vote on Sabins Pasture. Nothing is there. What kind of faith do you have that something will appear at Country Club Road within the next 5 years or 10 years? Which is more realistic?
So, as pertains to Country Club Road, after listening to last night's discussions about it, if Bill Frazier, who's very knowledgeable on the subject, obviously, if he's to be believed, it is unlikely that there will be anything there in 5 to 10 years in the way of what we've been discussing and what we've been expecting. They're working. The discussion last night was about some recreation opportunities. My feeling about that property is that, first of all, any housing is good housing. We need housing. If there is a path to Country Club Road being full of multiple levels of affordability of housing, and it can be connected to our downtown in a meaningful way, I think I would love to see that plan. But I don't think we've really seen a fully formed plan that can deliver that at this time.
We have a limited capital budget, and $3 million is tied up in that. There are people who say, let's explore getting out of this and recapturing the $3 million and using it for basically structural needs, sewer and water, instead of up there, downtown, where we're having water leaks on a routine basis. What's your feeling on recapturing that and reinvesting it in the core to finally address the roads underneath the roads? You're not going to use that money to pave roads. That's inappropriate. But for underneath the roads, what's your feeling on that? There is part of the community that advocates that.
So I think that if there is a three-legged stool, right, of what we need, where the seat is that far-off vision that we're talking about of what we want downtown to look like, then I think that the first leg of that is infrastructure. Smart infrastructure decisions that specifically address the future housing that we want in the places that we want it. And for my money, that place is downtown. Downtown is the engine. It's the heart that pumps us in and out and throughout the region. And so, yes, focusing on infrastructure, especially downtown, to encourage more housing at all affordability levels.
What kind of infrastructure are you speaking of downtown?
I mean, we have to address the water systems, right? Of course, as you said, we're not going to use it to pave over roads. Well, paving is part of it. Roads are very important. That's the surface thing that everybody touches every day. That's the thing that costs you more money in tires and suspension work because of potholes that we encounter. But you are right. If you're going to paint a wall in your house, but you know that there is plumbing work that needs to be done behind that, well, you would be foolish to invest a whole lot in painting it if you're going to have to tear it up and fix the plumbing underneath. So we do need to address those things first.
If all we can do is get recreational opportunities, couldn't we do that? If we're talking about a rec center, couldn't that be built out by the recreation fields out on Elm Street near the field? In which case, that property isn't necessary, and you know, if it's not going to be used for housing, isn't that an expensive use just to put a rec center there?
I would say it is an expensive use. I think that in hindsight, those funds would have been better spent focusing on downtown and focusing on
If you were on
infrastructure.
council, would you open up that discussion on whether we should retain that land?
I think it is a worthwhile discussion, yes.
Isabel Circle
Sure.
was a set of land developers who had a piece, who were coming to the city for funds for sewer and water going in there. And it was going to be paid back over a series, in theory, over a series of 20 years. Some said that that was getting needed housing into the city. Some said that the city was sheltering land speculators from downside risk. Is that the role of the city, to sit and make those kind of investments? Or is that the role of the land developer to do? There's an argument on both sides.
There is an argument being made on both sides. What I will say is we need housing. And if a developer can do it, then great, more power to them, and how can we support them? And I think that those are important questions. If investments need to be made in our infrastructure to attract more development, to make development possible, then we should look at that. Even, this isn't the question you asked, but the former M&M beverage spot that's between Shaw's and the Drawing Board,
I was going to get to that.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. Sure, the city's strapped for cash. We need money. If we sold that place, we'd bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that would be terrific. The question before us is, what is more important to our long-term survival and prosperity here? Is it the money we would get from selling this piece now, or is it the homes, the economic activity, the increased tax base, and the beauty that would come out of having a fully functioning building there that would allow for more residents, more retail? I mean, the answer is what we really, going back to what's really important, and then the money conversation being meaningful after that, is the important thing is we need more housing downtown where everyone can walk to the things that they need. That will broaden our tax base, bringing down your individual burden, my individual burden, and breathing more economic development into all of the businesses that exist down there. That's what we need. That is more important than whatever money we would get out of the sale of the thing. So similarly, Isabel Circle, I don't want to just blanket say, oh, we absolutely should do it this way, or one way or another. One thing I am learning as I'm running for the seat is that there is so much to learn, and so I will continue to learn. That's just how we do.
Well, that deal is off the table anyway
Sure,
at this
okay,
point.
good point. I guess my point is that those decisions need to be made in service of the long-term vision.
Well, I'll present, again, that lot next to the art store and
Sure.
next to the grocery as a case point. We've been trying to sell that lot for market value and had very few takers. Or we could take the Berry approach and sell it for $1. Which approach do you feel is more prudent?
I think I've kind of already hit on that. I think we need to look at what is the long-term need, and that's what we should pursue. And we make this short-term decision. If we can get that long-term vision fulfilled by selling this thing for $1, then that works. If we cannot get it fulfilled by selling it for $1 or 400 or 400 million, then that's not the right move. If it doesn't serve what we want in the long term, then it's not the right decision.
Homelessness. That's a huge issue.
All right.
Throw that on you.
Hard left. Let's go. Yeah.
What's your feeling on the city's approach on that?
I'm not sure I understand what the city's approach is, to be honest.
Well, there's a homeless task force that reports to City Council every so often that helps to shape Council's feelings on this.
Okay.
My question, and this is an unusual take on this, encampments, potential encampments in Hubbard Park. Is the primary concern for that institutionally the elected City Council or the elected Park Commission? Which has the primary concern over possible encampments within Hubbard Park?
Oh. Ask the question again. I'm not sure I fully
There are
understand.
two elected bodies.
Right.
One is the Parks Commission that has authority over Hubbard Park.
Mm-hmm.
One is the elected City Council that has the authority over the city itself. Which one should have primary responsibility over dealing with the issue of encampments within that park?
Okay, I think I understand your question now. I think I'll give you an unsatisfying answer, which is that to me sounds like the question at its core is in some ways a legal and process and structure question, and I don't know what the correct answer is. What I think is the real answer in the end is that it is neither just parks nor just city council. We as a community have a responsibility to address the dignity of all human beings who live in Montpelier, including and especially the least of us.
Are encampments, major encampments, appropriate in Hubbard Park given its lack of sanitation facilities?
I don't know how to answer that question. Yeah,
It's one that council, would certainly be.
It's definitely one that.
And a good answer, actually.
So what I'll say is, in terms of how do I feel the city's approach to it is, I don't see a clear approach, to be honest. I see what I see in our community is a desire for us to not have this problem, right? Well, but we are talking about people, and just choosing to not look and wish that it weren't so is not a solution. Those people require basic human needs and services, just like all of us who can afford them. I don't know what the answer is. I do know that I don't think that homelessness itself is something that can be solved, because the reasons for people being unhoused are they're systemic and they're so varied. This person's reason for not having a home and this person's reason are maybe completely different. There is no, if there were an easy solution to homelessness, we would have done it already, but there isn't.
This is being filmed while it's snowing outside, and no one's walking on that bike path. When the weather warms up, how do you deal with the security of the bike path between the grocery store and the transit center so that people feel safe walking on that path? Or do you feel that's an issue at all?
I feel that if people don't feel safe walking in public areas, that is an issue. Yes. There are several approaches we could take. One of them is a kind of brutal enforcement approach, which I don't think is the right approach. Another is do nothing about it at all. That's obviously not the right approach either. Our students need to feel safe. I'm not sure that I have a simple answer. I do know what some of the answers cannot be.
Okay, what would they not be?
The answers cannot be that you're not allowed to be there if you're an unhoused person. That's too broad, right? We have laws, and we're a community of rule of law, right? On the other hand, you can't harass and bully and intimidate other people in town. That behavior is can't be allowed to continue. So I think there may be some combination of policing and enforcement, but we need to be very careful about what it is that we are enforcing, and perhaps some level of community involvement, education, where there could be other folks who are not police who are just present at those times when students really need to feel
Well, not only
supported.
students, but people walking dogs.
Sure,
people,
everybody.
Everybody. Are these unhoused people, or are these hooligans? Are unhoused people taking the fall for the actions of hooligans?
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, I would say if the question is, are unhoused people hooligans? I would say, sure, some of them are, but so are housed people.
Exactly.
Right?
But
there are more housed hooligans
are we
than
framing it to the disadvantage of one vulnerable client population,
maybe
human
so.
population?
And so that's why I say it's important for us to address the basic dignity of all human beings. Just because you and I live in Montpelier, and there is some jerk that lives in Montpelier, it doesn't make you a jerk or me a jerk. We might also be jerks, but that's not because of one unrepresentative individual, right? We can't lump everybody together because we don't like the actions of some.
This is an unprecedented time in city history. We've had 2 incumbents step down in the same election. Mm-hmm. And some have termed the city council dysfunctional. The meetings go on and on and on without resolution. Things are pushed to the next meeting. There are special meetings, and they go on and on and on. The budget process was truly excruciating and went to the final day. How do you recommend that City Council return back to a period where they were able to do business within a set amount of time and make decisions?
So, not having been a part of it at that time, I'm not sure what they were doing. I will say that, so first let me put a caveat in here. I think that Bill Frazier has served this city for half of his life. And whether you approve of the job he's done or you don't approve of the job that he has done, he has been dedicated and he has given a lot of his time. And so he deserves an amount of gratitude and grace and respect for that service. Having said that, in my opinion, the city manager role, whoever you have in there, should be limited. I don't know if it's 5 years or 10 years, but after some period of time, leadership should revolve so that we maintain fresh perspectives. And I think that this moment, with a new city manager coming in sometime in the next year or so, is going to be a pivotal moment for us to ask exactly those questions, not only with how does city council run and how does it run on time and have resolutions done, but also the way we do everything in City Hall and the decisions that we make about infrastructure and how we do things. It is really a transformative opportunity that has presented itself.
Would you do the same to boards and commissions? We have people on some of those commissions who've been on there for over a decade. Would you limit time on boards and commissions so that you have fresh blood going through there on a more timely basis?
If the number of seats in there are limited,
Yes, they are.
then yes, I think that there should be. I think in an ideal situation, there's always going to be a combination of fresh newness as well as seasoned experience. You don't want to just.
So would you stagger the terms
I think that is a good idea. Yes.
I wanted to get to one that I passed by, and I know where it would have fit in this conversation when we talked about roads. The local options tax. Are you in favor of passing it and
Yes.
raising it?
Yes, I'm in favor of the local options tax.
The funds that would be generated are estimated to be $600,000. $150,000 is spoken for right now. $100,000 would go into the infrastructure, $50,000 to Montpelier Live, which leaves $400,000. The mayor has spoken of using a significant amount of the $400,000 to hire back city employees who were riffed in this budget. Others have advocated that that money be used for roads, that $500,000 be used, because you're not, as we said earlier in this broadcast, you're not going to use capital funding to do road resurfacing.
Right.
What would you see the best use of $400,000 annually be?
Okay, I promise I am going to answer you, but first, I think that the rest of that money, the other 400, is not guaranteed. Right. So first of all, the $600,000 number is an estimate, and as Bill pointed out, when we opted for the meals and rooms tax, it took the state some 6 months or so to get the thing in place. Now, will there be that much and more in future years? Probably so. So that's as a separate conversation. But in this first year, I don't know that we can count on that much coming in. If we don't get started until January, it may only be half of that amount, for example.
But even if the half of it,
so,
where
yes,
would you allocate?
I think that before we can decide that, there needs to be more conversation with the community at large, and also, and especially with the business community downtown. I think the business community feels that they have been left out of conversations about things that directly impact them. Partly some things like trash collection and if street lamps are out, et cetera. So making sure that they are brought in as a partner, and a very valued partner, is critical to making that decision. Having said all of that, if you're putting me on the spot today to come up with an answer, I might say that one of the things I think we could really benefit from is having a little bit more flexibility as pertains especially to infrastructure projects. We have opportunities created by oopsies, for lack of a better word. Oh, a water main break. Well, we got to rip open the street, and we've got to get in there. We've got to address this emergent issue that's happened. If we're able to find opportunities to do things that maybe previously hadn't been budgeted, we need to be able to have flexibility for that. For example, on a household level, you want to have an emergency cash fund so that your paycheck comes late, you get laid off of work or whatnot. You don't have to immediately go to Plan R, right? There's a little bit of a cushion. And I know the city has reserve funds, but I think that could potentially be that building a reserve fund specifically for infrastructure opportunities as they arise is potentially a good use of that money. I do think it will be unsatisfying to the community if we say, oh, we'll just take that money and throw it all into the pile and everything will be business as usual. I don't think anyone in the community will be satisfied with that answer. And so we need to engage the community, find out what's important to them, engage the business community especially, and find out what's important to them, because ultimately they're the ones that are bringing in all of that money through the retail activity, and come to that conclusion as a community.
Next year's budget.
Yeah.
At the very beginning of this, there was a block of city council that said, let's keep this budget at the cost of living. Let's after years of growth, The city manager on the other side was saying we need more positions in order to fill needs that are being unaddressed that the community really feels should be addressed.
Sure.
And that was the push me, pull me. For next year's budget, do you see yourself supporting a budget that's at the cost of living or near the cost of living for sustainability purposes? Or do you see yourself addressing unmet needs, in the community? Where on that continuum do you see yourself? And you can't say the middle.
You can't say the middle. No, but I'll go back to what I said first about what I bring from my day job to this. The first conversation needs to be about what is important to us as a community. Where do we want to live, and what do we want this place to look like? Yes, responsible management of our resources is important, of course. We all do it at our home budgeting level, but ultimately, the services we require, the world that we want to live in, the vision that we have for the future of our community comes first, and only once we understand what that is a conversation about dollars meaningful.
Is budget sustainability, keeping our city budget affordable for people, that was not on the city questionnaire. Is that part of the calculus for you? Is that a co-equal part of the calculus?
I do think that the sustainability of increasing property taxes or the unsustainability of increasing property taxes is probably the number one thing as I knock on people's doors and talk to people and say, what is it that takes you to the ballot box? What is important to you? 8 out of 10 at least start with, oh, well, taxes. Our taxes are so high. Short-term answers of just limiting us to some number are not the way to get the long-term solution that we need. The long-term solution is to broaden the tax base through more housing available at all levels of affordability, and that has to be addressed first by smart infrastructure choices. And the outcome of that, of course, is the economic development part. If we can get these first two pieces right, the economic development part takes care of itself in many ways. And in the other ways that it doesn't take care of itself, we rely on partners like Montpelier Alive to do that proactive work of finding other and more creative ways to do it. But spreading that tax base through more housing is the long-term answer to that question, I believe.
Now, every interview, of which this is an interview, if this were a job interview, I'd say, okay, what question do you have that I didn't ask? Is there anything that I didn't ask that you would like to answer?
Well, there is something that doesn't get asked because I think that it doesn't come up as a tangible thing. It's not about money. It's not about roads. It's not about something that we can touch. And that thing is the tone and the outlook with which we do things. And I'm going to talk about the search for Bill's replacement here for a second. Who we find is super important. How we go about finding that person, how we onboard that person is perhaps the most important thing that Montpelier will do in the past 30 years or the next. And the reason I say that is we have an opportunity here to cast a wide net for talent. And we are a state capital. That is an attractive position for someone who is in that field. And to say this is a transformational moment in our city's history and therefore in our state's history, there are so many opportunities that have been created because of hardships. There are so many parcels of land across downtown that need to be recovered and redeveloped because of what happened during the flood. The federal building is being disposed of by the federal government. The state,
in time.
In time. All things in time, of course. The state is talking about what to do with its various properties and parking lots up and down the river. We have the Vermont Center for Independent Living building is has come available. The M&M beverage lot. There are a lot of opportunities there. And those are just the housing pieces. But also the decisions that we make, the vision that we create, and how we go about doing that. Do we do that as solving a problem that we don't want, or do we do that as with optimism, with positivity, and with pursuing a vision of the place that our kids are going to move home to? Those are two very different outcomes, I think, and it starts with the tone that we take when we go through this. I think that's super important.
When we talk about the M&M building, do you ever see Confluence Park coming back?
My understanding is that currently it is dead. I was really disappointed by that decision, partly because I think that the question before City Council was not, are we definitely building Confluence Park as we've all imagined it right here in this moment? I think the question was simply, do we support continuing to talk about this and allowing the River Conservancy and those partners to continue their work? And Council said no. And I felt it was a premature no. If the answer is no, then the correct answer was still going to be no down the road. I would love to see more green space and more riverfront space as you enter Montpelier. Thinking back to the first time I drove through, there was nothing along that road that made me go, ooh. It was the dome gleaming in the sunlight that brought me into town, and then crossing over rivers 3 and 4 times that really made me think, wow, this place is cool. And I think that with more space, either in some combination of Confluence Park or the parking lots behind the state buildings, there's a lot of opportunity for us to discuss that. It's not going to happen by accident. It has to be handled with intention, and that intention has to drive us towards a shared vision. I know I sound like a broken record, but honestly, if we don't have an idea of what that gleaming city in the valley looks like, then the short-term decisions we're not rowing in the same direction. And we need to just row in the same direction with optimism and with a positive tone.
Marc, thank you so very much. First of all, for stepping forward to run, but also for being on the show. And I would urge everybody to watch all of these shows. All of them are going to be very, very good. And to get out and vote for town meeting day. Either vote in mail or actually get out and vote. Tell your friends to do likewise. As you all are aware, elections do have consequences. Thank you so very much.